Welcome to You Heard It From Us, the podcast where adventure meets advice. I'm DNDWife, your artistic storyteller and dedicated miniature painter.
And I'm Dungeon Master Eguile, your seasoned storyteller with a flair for epic tales and a passion for bringing our worlds to life. Together, we are a couple of nerds.
Whether you're navigating the depths of the dungeon or the dynamics of your gaming table, we're here to explore the vibrant world of tabletop role-playing games with you.
Each episode, we dive into topics that every gamer can relate to, like, is there really such thing as too many dice?
Or how to keep the peace when your co-adventurer is also your co-pilot in life.
We share our own trials, triumphs, and tales from the enchanting world of Extraeus and beyond, all while connecting with you, our amazing Ttrpg community.
From community polls to social media shoutouts, we want you to be part of our adventure. So grab your favorite set of dice
and join us as we embark on a quest to make your tabletop gaming experience more fun and meaningful.
This is You Heard It From Us,
where every episode is an adventure. Welcome back, adventurers and dice rollers, to another episode of You Heard It From Us. I'm your DM, Eguile.
And I'm DNDWife. Today we're diving into a fun and sometimes divisive topic, accents at the TTRPG table. Do they make the game more immersive, or do they just add unnecessary stress?
We'll be discussing the pros and cons, the results of our community poll, and of course, our own personal experiences. But let's first get into it a little bit. Obviously, as a DM, obviously accents are both the like a tool and like the bane of my existence, just because like I can do some, right? Like you can do some and stuff like that, but like when you have to be a ton of different people, it's a little tough. But I wish I could just be one person and one accent, because I feel like you could really focus.
Yeah, it's fun. When players use accents more often than DMs, I think, because like you said, it is a lot harder for DMs to keep track.
More often?
Well, because we were able to just focus on the one character, so we can focus on just doing the accent for one. So we might do it more often than, say, a DM who's working on like a whole world full of characters. You know?
I got you. First, I was like, wait, I mean, I got to do a bunch of different ones. You just got to do one over and over and over
again. That's what I'm saying, though. That's why, because it's easier for us. That's why we might choose to do it more often.
Gotcha.
But I think it also helps distinguish like the speakers from the rest of the party. It helps kind of differentiate you from the group, but not too much, just enough to give you some flair.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, I feel like everyone kind of has like the internal monologue of like their character speaking or their character saying something, so they want, I feel like that's what like an accent also represents. It's like, how does the person who is obviously representing this character also view? Because I feel like there's a lot to say about what kind of accents you pick into kind of that creates changes to like how you even view the character to begin with.
Yeah, that's a good point. You've got to feel comfortable in the accent to kind of do it, especially for a prolonged time at a table. But if you do it right, then it can really just enhance the immersion at the table, make the character feel more real, and not just to you, but to the other people at the table as well. I think it's been helping, especially at our table, a lot, because we have started calling each other by our characters' names more often than not.
Yeah, but I don't know how much that's based on accents versus the just obviously being the character, because not everyone at our table.
True, I think it just contributes in some ways.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be devil's advocate, demon's advocate. In terms of that, I think there is a lot that has to do with accents and everything else, but I don't think that plays across all players, right? So, like, not everyone's the biggest fan of doing accents, especially if you're a little self-conscious. Like you said, like, if you're a little self-conscious, you're kind of worried about, are they just going to make fun of me? Or am I going to sound, either very stereotypical or am I going to butcher it so bad that it's offensive?
Yeah, right. Like one of the biggest worries is like, okay, if I'm going to do an accent, do I have to just do like the same accents that everybody thinks, right? Like the dwarf has to be Scottish.
Yeah, right.
The elf has to be British.
Yeah.
The rogue can be pretty much any like Cockney or Irish.
Yeah, I think that's also like a big, but at the same time, I feel like some people lean into that because it is what we see so much in like modern media.
True.
So like, I mean, everyone's like iconic dwarf is like Gimli, right? Like, so obviously like everyone,
Of course, he's Scottish.
right? So you have that, so you're like, oh, so if you already just start where you're like, oh, I'm gonna be a dwarf like Gimli. Well, obviously you're already gonna like have the accent.
You kind of want to start that way.
You know, and so that's tough, and like also like you know, maintaining them, you know, for me, it kind of lucks out because obviously with like NPCs and stuff like that, it's like short jaunts. It's like, hey, this guy, he has an accent for a few moments and then he's done, he's gone, he's never existing again. I never have to say the same accent again. But like, it can be hard to maintain, like, if it is like, okay, my character speaks with this like strong Southern affect, and then it's like, oh man, I'm just so tired and I forget, or I'm so into the zone. And so then, you know, like you said, some players start to be like, okay, well, wait, did you say that as your person, or did you say that as you, or is this just metagaming? You know?
Right. That's tough, obviously, and it's not like we play short sessions. We play upwards of like 8-hour sessions.
Yeah,
so
right.
maintaining an accent across that time is much more difficult. And so I just think true too, as a DM, it can be really hard to just keep track of all the different accents you're giving NPCs. Especially if you're doing a variety of accents, that can be so hard to keep track of.
I feel like, you know, I've seen like where like DMs talk about like, oh, I write, you know, little key markers to keep their, it's impossible. Like half the time it's like, all right, you know, it's a fantasy world, maybe their affect changed or something. Especially like if you're not having sessions all the time. I will say when we were in earlier days and we would have sessions every other week, it was a little easier because we were constantly in the story. It was constantly the same characters. But now that we meet more of like a once a month kind of thing, it's a lot harder to kind of keep of like, okay, how did this person talk? Like, what was this person? And like, we record our sessions. Even then, that's still tough to like go back to listen, and even like listening, you're like, okay, that's what they sound like. And then in the heat of the session, you're just like, oh, court blimey, and like all of a sudden now she's freaking, you know, whoever you're talking,
Cockney instead.
they're Cockney all of a sudden, and you're just like, oh crud, that was the wrong person. You're like, shit, let me go back and change it.
And even I'll fall into that too, because I use accents at the table. I'll mess up sometimes and fall in, like if I'm doing a British accent, I'll fall into a little Cockney every now and then and kind of mess up the vibe.
Yeah, and then there's like, and then there's like the whole thing of like doing accents, and it's like, okay, like, am I doing like an accent correct, or am I just doing the most horribly overplayed, overacted version? And like, you know, God help you if like someone at the table also happens to have that accent, you're just butchering it.
Right.
You know, then they're going to think you're doing it on purpose to make fun of their natural accent. It just becomes a big mess. So a lot of people, you know, D&D players tend to be massive introverts. You know, we tend not to want to cause you know, those kind of things, you know, and so, you know, like for me too, it's like, you know, certain accents I can do more regularly. So then I also find myself when it's like, oh, I'm going to try this accent. So if I try to do something French, it's like, okay, well then it always ends up being like some other language later on because I can't keep it going long enough.
Or you just don't remember with everything happening, all the things you have to juggle, and it's just tough.
Yeah, and so I mean, I you know, they're great tools in a lot of sense. And you know, it's funny, as I actually was watching a video on today from Wired with Brandon Lee Mulligan, and he was even talking about how like, you know, being a male and doing like female voices, he just uses his natural speaking voice to always delineate a female. So like any other male, he'll use some sort of voice, an accent or whatnot. But then if it's a female, he'll use his own voice so that he's not like lowering his voice, which is sometimes patronizing and just sounds terrible. But also just kind of always delineates, oh, when the DM is kind of role playing in his natural voice, it's a female speaker. And that is an easy way to both use an accent while not using an accent.
I get you. That's a really interesting take on it. I hadn't thought of like not using an accent to delineate a character.
Yeah, like because even me, like as a DM, I try to like use my natural like wordings or affect or accent as least as possible because I'm kind of also the narrator. So it's like, okay, well, I need them to know when am I narrating and when are they receiving some sort of information or someone speaking.
Yeah, very much so. That can be tough. I completely understand.
Right. And so obviously, as always with You Heard From Us, it's not just about you and I, it's about everybody in our can community. So we always pose a question with each Heard It From Us to see how exactly our little community here feels about the current topic or question.
Oh, yeah. And what was this week's question?
So this week's question, which was what I posed, was how do you like to speak at your TTRPG tables? And we figured we break it up in as in traditional ways, into funny ways.
Yeah.
We obviously have where you just use your own speaking voice. You're not quite, wanting to use an accent, or you just like to... Or I guess in the case you just your character has your voice.
Yeah.
So hey, win-win.
That is the accent.
B, you speak in an accent, but only when speaking as your character. So traditional kind of standard D&D fare. When you want your character to speak, the accent comes out. If it's just you talking, it's just you talking.
Yeah.
And then the fun one, which was C, I use the accent all the time. Now these are for your hardcore RPers who live and breathe their character and are always in character when they come to the session. Though we've had a few that are some diehard role players, but we've never quite had the always on,
not full on
accent.
Nah, it's tough.
But what was the results today?
Well, there wasn't like a clear winner except for accents only when in character. That was the majority, but there were a few that decided my own voice is better. The comfort level, I think, is key here for those who chose that, just because playing in your own voice kind of removes the pressure of just getting it right. Like you said, there's just a lot that could go wrong when doing an accent, and so when presented with the choice, some people would rather just not.
Yeah, I think that, it comes down to, I think a lot of it's like experience. It's like when you're already new and you have like so much you're trying to learn how to play, trying to learn how to interact in a TTRPG and all that like accent is the last thing you want to even think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So you're just like, I'll deal with that later. But then like veterans who have played years, who have multiple characters, they're the ones that have, 3-page backstories.
Yeah.
They can tell you where they, what regional dialect they have. And I think that kind of lets you know it's just like the different like deeper levels of like playerdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Once you get, like you said, higher up there and in experience with the game, you really start branching out to what other things you can do. So, at first you just got to get comfortable with playing the game and making sure your character is doing everything right. But once you're so comfortable with it, then you can start being like, oh, well, maybe I can add an accent. I can do this.
Yeah.
And that's where you kind of are able to put more personal touches to your character. I think that's why the majority chose accents when in character, because it really helps them immerse themselves, but also delineates kind of that separate talk between player and character to not make it too confusing. Right.
And it's like, obviously for our third option of all the time, we didn't really have anyone vote for that, obviously, because, though we hear stories, and I imagine there are tables out there that exist that are, where they role play the entirety of the time, I think it would create a interesting kind of way of getting into that headspace where it's, you enter into wherever you play, and as soon as you do, boom, you are your character.
Yep.
You are the character when they see. I think that could be a little bit fun, but it could be utterly exhausting.
I would be like gone at the end of the night. Just put me to sleep.
Right, because you just, maintaining that. Even if you look at like shows like Critical Role, they're not maintaining their characters, though, albeit they do speak a lot in their characters' voices. Absolutely. They even themselves will take breaks, make jokes, talk off to the side, use their natural voices. And so it just shows that it's like, it is that fun balance between like, okay, I, the player, and my character are two different people, and though we are kind of similar, but you're able to now see, because as simple as just kind of changing the way I talk lets you know, oh, am I my character or am I me?
And that can be really helpful, not just to the player, it can be helpful to the DM, and it can be helpful to the other players as well, just to make sure everybody knows who's talking and what's going on.
Yeah, plus I think when it comes to accents themselves, I think that there's more to that. And I practice this a lot myself in that, mannerisms, body language, the way you hold your hands as a way of being like a substitute for accents can also help you too.
That's a good point.
Like we have one person who, at our table who doesn't necessarily have an accent, but they use kind of that like ooh woo talk, right? So it's not even really an accent to them.
Yeah.
Like they're not really using it, but they're just speaking in a certain cadence or style.
An affect.
That lets you know when their character's talking. And so it's like, okay, well they're kind of like dipping their toe into the accent, they're not getting too crazy.
They're trying something new.
But I think, for like you were even saying to kind of piggyback on what you're saying to help the DM. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is it really kind of lets me know as a dungeon master, who is speaking, when they are speaking, and I'm kind of a knee-jerk DM, so I feel like there is a kind of a glory to doing the first thing that comes out of your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
And so a few of you guys have learned that, if you have kind of that, that mouth that quickly, says what you're thinking before you think about it, that if you have an accent, it kind of helps you a little bit because it lets me know it's like, oh, did you say that or did your character say that?
It's a good tool. We have a player who's constantly making a little sassy remarks, and it's all fun and games, but when you're doing that in character in game, that could offend somebody, some NPC or something, and cause issues.
Yeah.
So it's fun to like differentiate.
Yeah, like so it's not necessarily always just about the role play aspect of like, oh, well, what is my character? Well, it's like anything that delineates and separates yourself from your own character, right? Because it also I feel like helps you also kind of get into that headspace too, right? Like so if you're like, oh well, my in your case most of your characters speak with some sort of British European affect. And so you know that like, okay, once you start speaking that way, it's like, oh, it's game time. Like you just know as a player, I as a DM know, oh, okay, this is her character speaking. So, if there's just like a random screw you out of nowhere, but if it's in a British accent, it's not directed towards me.
Yeah.
Or another player. So I think that's fun, but not everyone I think loves that challenge.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. And, even though they can enhance the character's personality and the backstory, it's tough to feel comfortable enough to do that. Like, I've used distinct accents for all 3 of my last campaigns. Every single one I've used an accent. My first one was a Russian accent. Then Brenna was an Irish accent. And now I'm using a British accent for my elf. So, I'm kind of on the nose for that one, yeah. But where I believe that accents add a little bit of like vocal diversity, they help keep voices distinct during chaotic game sessions, especially I think during things like combat, especially with our new combat system where everything kind of happens at once. Being able to speak and know who's speaking is very important.
Yeah, that's true. And then it is kind of tough because no matter what you try to do, like crosstalk exists. I try to rearrange my table multiple times to get people who are talkity and try to work that. But no matter what, people are always going to be kind of talking while other people are trying to role play. And so I feel like if you do have the accent, it's kind of a two-way street. One, who's talking, and two, if it's important, obviously the person is talking in an accent. Other players get kind of like the hint, like, oh, they're in their accent. Okay, we're playing. Like it's game time. Like they're not that person. They're Luna now.
Yeah, it's fun, and I love it. I love using accents. I think they're great, but they're not for everyone, and not everyone feels as comfortable stepping into those things. It's the same way I think that if I did it in video versus audio is easy, right? Nobody's looking at me when I make the accent.
Yeah.
And even at the table, like it's just among friends, so it's fun. But like I believe for people trying to do accents at a table, it would be similar as if I were thinking of doing it on video. It would just be a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, too, it's like, for me as a dungeon master, it gets into where it's like, I have to use multiple accents for different characters that are in the same scene, but it's just me talking to myself.
Yeah, that's tough.
That stuff starts to get tough, and I can see how people like Matt Mercer, Brandon Lee Mulligan, like, that's some crazy respect for people who can do that kind of stuff. Because for me, it's like, I tend to try to use like vocal affectations and stuff like that in order to change, whether I pitch up, pitch down my voice, or I make it squeaky or whatnot. Because accents aren't my greatest tool, because I tend to just start blending them all into one one god awful unirace language that's probably going to exist in 1,000 years. Because it sounds like every freaking accent. Right. But I mean, especially, when you're a dungeon master, that could be tough when, you have 10 or 15 NPCs and it's like, oh, well, and they all have a British accent. Okay, cool. But if you're just doing that for every single person, okay, every single person sounds like that one British guy.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's the one guy in the town.
How do I know I'm not talking to different people?
So things like hand gestures, the way you hold your hands, the way you hold your body. Sometimes I'll hold my, my weight on one leg versus the other if I'm trying to signify different people. Those kind of things help me. Because, sometimes, it is tough, because if I'm like, oh, okay, well, what is this person's accent? It's like, okay, well, they're just like a slow person. Okay, well, I'll just create a more kind of slower speech, like they're thinking more, and I'll have them have much more of a deeper tone, because that's just what I'm feeling in the moment. And now I don't have necessarily an accent, but I have enough differences into this person that they're going to be unique. And now the players are going to, even by listening to him, going, okay, why is this guy speaking so slow? Is he dumb, or was he overthinking? Right. Maybe he's on to us. Maybe he's rolling insight checks. Oh, God, he's a bad guy, and all I had to do was have the guy speak slower. And that's all it did.
That's true. And it's a very little work for a lot of game there for story.
Versus going, oh, he had to have an Eastern European accent and, this.
Native to Slovakia.
With a slight drawl, and he was actually from this side of the town, so they actually speak with a lisp, and it's like, okay. Sure, if that's what you want to do, go forth. But, at a certain point, it gets a little too crazy. And with how things go. And so I think the only really distinct one is like my Cobalt voice, but I feel like my Cobalt voice is going to eventually destroy my larynx.
Oh yeah.
With the way it goes, as well as just everyone's eardrums.
It's a really high pitch.
but it is that thing where like you don't necessarily have to, find an accent or find some region. You can just make it up too. Like Absolutely. It doesn't have to be if you want to give it like a little of this, a little of that, a little of this, that's what works.
Yeah. Right. You want to make it maybe more of a fast talker, then you make him really choppy, really quick with his words, with his sentences, so they all sound like they're running together. Like you said, right, you can slow someone down so that they sound like they're maybe more pensive, more observant.
Yeah, and I think it really goes to show that like it really is kind of like the next step, right? Like so, and just like with everything D&D, there's like your characters level up and you as a player levels up. Like right, first you have just a sheet of paper, then you got like dice trays and stuff like that. Then it really goes into, and you're kind of also already on this train as much as the rest of my players. First it goes into accents, then it comes into wearing different pieces of garments to recognize your character. Whether it's goggles or horns or ears,
not full cosplay, but just little things to
and I think that just shows it's kind of just your natural evolution of how you connect with your characters, and we are a little bit of an exception to the rule because we do run a long running campaign, right? So these characters exist for years, which lets you guys kind of develop them. I mean, I think if we listen to the recordings from session 1 versus our recent session 30, I think even the accents themselves have probably developed and changed and altered. So it really shows with the long campaigns. I imagine if you have little short spurts where it's just a weekend, then you can have even more fun with it, right? You don't need to overthink it. Just try something new. If it doesn't work, well, that character's probably not going to live very long for it to worry about
and
it.
You don't have to think about them again. That's always fun. But if you do love accents, I just say go for it. They can be super fun. They can really add personality to the game, to your character. And the best part of it, I think, is there's no wrong way to role play it, right? Like, so what if your accent isn't perfect to the region or whatever, or it's not accurate? Who cares? It's what you love. It's how you like to sound during the game. As long as you're happy and the other characters can understand you, who cares?
Right. And I think that's the biggest important thing. Like, you try new things, especially if you can try like different types of games. So you can, if you have a lot of different characters, or if your characters happen to get killed a lot, try different ones each time. Like each time, just try something crazy, try a different pose, a posture. Oh, you're going to be the wizard. Get like some little toy you can play with off to the side that signifies when your wizard's in the room or talking, or hell, even get a wizard's hat. Like it's super simple. And even the smallest things that you do really show your character's kind of personality in the game and at the table.
Yeah, it shows you don't have to jump immediately into the accent pool quite yet. You can take little baby steps as you get there. And I think that would be like really fun to see. So if you guys have any experiences, any stories about how maybe you tried an accent or how you like to play your games, let us know on the Couple of Nerds Discord. We'd love to hear from you.
And as always, be sure to follow us on the Couple of Nerds Productions YouTube. Every subscribe gets us even more into the algorithm. So hopefully we can be shown a little bit more than what we're at right now.
We hope so. Thank you so much, guys. And that's it for today's episode. Whether you use accents or not, the most important thing is having fun at your table.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts. Do you use accents? What's your favorite one? Again, join our Discord and keep that conversation going.
And don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to You Heard It From Us. It helps us grow and keep these discussions rolling.
Thanks for listening, and may your dice rolls be high and your accents stay consistent.
Thanks for tuning in to You Heard It From Us.
We hope you enjoyed the adventure and picked up a few tips for your own gaming table. But the journey doesn't end here.
We'd love to hear from you. Join our Couple of Nerds Discord community where you can share your thoughts, ask questions, and suggest topics for future episodes. Whether you're a seasoned player or just starting out, there's a spot for everyone at our table.
To keep up with all our latest adventures and episodes, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep the magic alive and connects us with even more amazing listeners like you.
And remember, you can find us on all major podcast platforms. Just search for You Heard It From Us and hit that subscribe button.
We can't wait to see you on Discord and hear your stories. Together, we can make the world of tabletop gaming even more magical.
Until next time, keep rolling those dice.
And may your adventures be legendary.